Hello, and good day, adventurers. Today we're going to be talking about mana stones in Sirithel, specifically in Sirithel. But we're going to be talking about mana stones in general, which is a mechanic that I created to go with mana points instead of spells per day. If you remember, I had a video that went up a few weeks ago called Mana Points Instead of Spells Per Day, in which instead of being restricted to a certain amount of spells per day for a caster, they instead had a pool of mana points in which they spent to cast their spells. Well, mana stones is a way to essentially make they're like items in which you can store mana and be able to drain mana from to give yourself more mana points, or you could store mana points into it, so that way you have more mana points for later on. And then you can also end up creating mana potions and stuff like that with it, which is a huge deal. Mana potions are really great for being able to regain your mana. They're like health potions for your mana points. But yeah, that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about exactly how it works in Sirithel and how the different countries or kingdoms deal with it and how they see it. And so without further ado, I say let's get right into the video, shall we? So let's make big me disappear, little me reappear, and let's bring up our document. Alright, so mana stones instead of, or mana stones in Sirithel. In Sirithel, there is a special material that can be found all around called mana stones. Mana stones are mostly found in what's called mana veins. Mana veins are large forms of mana stones that scatter and reach across all of Sirithel from below ground. Mining of the mana stones is currently a hot topic within Sirithel, for its origins are still unknown and its presence has caused a strong controversy. Mana stone is a strong material, yet fragile if exhausted of its energy, or mana as it's come to be called. Some worshippers of the Eternal One, which is a religion that I will talk about at a later date, believe the mana veins to be the lifeblood of the god who either lives below all of Sirithel or is all of Sirithel. Mana stones have also been known to be found in small clusters unconnected from the mana veins. These have been taken to be called mana ponds. Many of those who live in the Eliac Isles believe mana to be everyone's life essence, collecting down below where many bury their dead to form the mana veins, and the mana that flows through the air and rains from the sky is to be from the dead that are burned or left above ground, and to mine it is to harvest the souls of their ancestors, though this is still debated on whether to do or not do in the Eliac Isles, because the Eliac Isles believes nothing should be buried and forgotten anymore, and so they are still debating on whether they should protect the mana veins or use the mana veins. While those who live in the northern wastes of Doreen believe mana to be a common aspect of nature and one capable of empowering the gifted and bending it to boost magic, but not everyone believes in magic, and so outsiders believe Doreen is just mining it for military purposes. Those in Hone have found the stones house a powerful alchemical property and believe it to be just another component used to craft like iron and herbs, but they rarely need to mine the material, for they can gain plenty from trade with other nations and even have a surplus of the materials due to their upbringing, where they mined and hollowed out many of the tunnels that make up their underground. Olaf Lund have found the stones are capable of making beautiful art, and they chose to see it as a tool usable in almost anything that make it better, whether it's weapons or curatives or even art. Olaf Lund has even taken the crafting weapons from the materials and even has one of the largest R&D departments investigating the strange material. Gothrion seeks to protect the stones and argues they are rare and do not grow back like the trees, and to mine it could cause dangerous consequences for the entire world, but they do not believe in ignoring it, just that it should be farmed, not mined. They have even gone so far as to start their own R&D program so as to gather proof to help their case in stopping the other nations from mining, especially Doreen and Ozirian, who mine it constantly. Nozirian mine it without care and seek to harness its power to aid them in their war against Ariad, and have disputed with Gothrion over the rights to mine near their untouched sources at the border. They've even caused what some are calling the Shadow Wars, where Gothrion and Nozirian fight over lands where the public eye cannot see. If this were to be true, this could cause problems for every nation, for it will be breaking of the seven pieces. Ariad agreed with the Eleic Isles and Gothrion and seek to protect the veins from being mined, yet still seek to experiment with the stones they have gained prior to their decision and have gained from their war efforts against Nozirian in search of a way to make them unusable by Nozirian Empire. Ariad, though they have agreed to save the veins, still mine mana stone ponds. Whether it is the lifeblood of a god, essence of the dead, natural or unstable is still to be seen, but will it be too late by the time Sirithel finally learns of the stone's true purposes? Nobody knows. Perhaps the stone has no purpose and has been given one, only time will tell. Mining of the stones is outlawed in Gothrion and Ariad and is currently being debated over in the Eleic Isles. Stones are commonly mined in Doreen, Olaflund, and Nozirian. Mana stone products vary from kingdom to kingdom, but are most commonly sold in Olaflund and Hone. Mana stones are a strong substance and very difficult to shape when it houses mana within, but if drained of the mana, it becomes very fragile and more easy to shape, but this process is a very difficult one and very few people master it. Mana stones gain the fragile quality when drained of all its mana within, but when there is mana within the stones, it can be drained from the item as a move action. Weapons and armor can be forged of mana stones. Doing so treats the item as a masterwork and is capable of storing mana. Items that use a lot of mana stone in place of metal, such as swords, maces, axes, and other similar amounts, need 4 mana worth of stone if light, 5 for one-handed, and 6 for two-handed weapons. Weapons that don't use as much stone, such as spears, arrows, and rapiers, use only 1 mana worth of stone if ammo, 2 if light, 3 if one-handed, and 4 if two-handed. Weapons that would use mostly mana stone for its construction, such as clubs, staves, nunchucks, and similar weapons, use 6 mana worth of stone for light, 7 for one-handed, and 8 for two-handed. Armor can only be adorned with mana stones and not forged of it, for the craft has proven too difficult and also not reliable when drained. Adorning light armor will need 4 mana worth of stone, medium armor will need 6 mana worth of stone, and heavy armor will need 8 mana worth of stone. Crafting a mana potion needs the raw mana dust or shards from mining and a long time to forge. Crafting a mana potion has a DC alchemy check equal to 15 plus the amount of mana you're putting into it. The time it takes to craft a mana potion is equal to 1 hour per point of mana in the potion. Example, a mana potion with 4 mana will take 4 hours. An alternative rule that you could play with is crafting a mana potion, you must choose how many D8 you wish to have worth of mana in the potion, and the DC is 15 plus 4 for every D8 in the potion. An example, a 2d8 mana potion is a DC 22, 15 plus 8, and will also take up to 4 hours for every d8, so this potion would take 8 hours to create. So these are 2 different rules to play with. You can either play with the more hard rules, in which it is for every point is worth something to the mana potions, and so it's a little bit more restrictive and a little bit more difficult to regain your mana points. Or you can play it with a more casual health point like rule, where it's treated more like health points in a way, in which you get d8's worth of mana points restored and you leave it more to chance, and so on and so forth. To brew, forge, or adorn an item of mana stones costs an additional amount of gold equal to 1,000 gold per mana worth. So this example is if you adorn light armor with 4 mana stones worth, it will cost an additional 4,000 gold. For custom real money house rule, which is an alternative rule system that I'll be introducing at a later date, the price will be determined / haggled by the crafter, but a good rule of thumb is 100 silver is in place of 1,000 gold. So that is an alternative rule that I'll talk about at a later date. I just wanted to include that on this document in case you do end up finding that video and you come back to it and you're curious on how to change that and so on and so forth. That's just a little simple rule that I have in place. Mana stones have a hardness of 10 and 20 hit points for every inch of thickness. So that's just the basic rules for mana stone and mana stone items. So yeah, mana stones are really cool, unique item. They have giant mana veins that appear underneath the ground in all of Sirithel. If you want to use these in your own world, I recommend you also have mana veins in the world and mana ponds in the world, where you have large structures of stone that line all throughout the map and go all sorts of random directions like veins, with little ponds of it here and there. Another cool rule that you could play with is that some other things that I like to do in Sirithel with the mana veins existing in the world and how mana exists in the world in general of Sirithel. I like to play with mana storms as well, in which essentially there could be, and these can vary from extremely difficult and dangerous to extremely simple and beautiful, in which case you'll have moments in where the storm, the skies will take unusual, cool colored, that is cool as in cold colored colors, like purples, blues, stuff like that. The sky will take on those colors, and it will rain a light, glowing blue rain, and essentially it could be extremely beautiful, and it causes mana regeneration during the storm. For a period of time. Essentially, you have essentially fast healing, but with mana, you essentially gain 1 mana point every turn during these storms, which it will be really cool things to play with, especially if you can plan on them. Like if you can find a way to predict the future with spells and stuff like that, predict when these storms will make an appearance, you can plan on it, or you could just have them be spontaneous things that happen to your parties during fights to give a slight advantage to your characters, or a slight advantage to enemy characters, enemy casters, because it will affect everybody in the area. So enemy casters will end up gaining the regenerative capabilities of these storms. But then you could also have extremely dangerous mana storms where the sky takes on those cold colors as well, and it rains that light blue, but the lightning storms come with random spell effects. You could have lightning storms be a fireball effect where it landed, and not just a normal lightning strike, where thunder could actually cause thunderous damage to people in the area every once in a while, like actual sound damage. That people need to make saves to resist and get to safe locations, get inside buildings, get inside caves to try and resist the storm to essentially deter or to just cause problems. And it could cause a much more vigorous healing of the mana points per turn. And this is just a fun little mechanic to play with in your games that I highly recommend that you do. If you're going to have the mana veins, you should also have the mana storms. They're a really cool feature. And then another cool thing about the mana veins is that being near mana veins, you should be regenerating mana points. Like just being near a mana vein, you should be regenerating mana points. I could argue that during being next to a mana pond, you don't. And I should, if you're going to play with this, I feel like you should follow that rule as well. During when around mana ponds, you don't heal, but around mana veins, you do heal mana points, and the reason for that is because there's mana flowing through the mana veins. Mana ponds are stagnant amounts of mana that are just piled or pooled into these stones. And so it's not moving anywhere. It's not regenerating or having mana come from locations and stuff like that. The mana's not coming or going or anything like that. It's just there. So it shouldn't cause regeneration, but mana veins should. Being close to mana veins should regen. So there could be moments where you just find yourself stepping onto a mana vein. Maybe your party wants to build a base on top of a mana vein. That would be a really cool idea. Building a keep or a kingdom on top of a mana vein and going from there, and having this huge advantage of mana regeneration for their defensive casters, defending the city that they build there, and so on and so forth. But yeah, just cool little mechanic. Mana stones in Sirithel, how they work, and just a little rundown about mana storms as well. Otherwise, I hope that you guys enjoyed this little document. I hope you guys enjoyed my information on mana stones, and I hope you play with them. I hope you try them out and come talk to me in a stream, or come talk to me in one of my most recent video comments, or in this video's comments, and just let me know if you guys tried out mana stones with mana points instead of spells per day and how they work. Maybe you have a different idea of how they should work, or it worked better for you a certain way. Go ahead and let me know that. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear people's opinions on my stuff. Otherwise, yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have a safe adventure.